All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome. It looks like we are broadcasting live out into the YouTube land. So it's so great to see everyone joining this live stream. We are broadcasting a minute before our start time over here. So not to worry, we'll get started in just about a minute, but go ahead and get settled in, get excited for today's program. And as we're waiting to officially get underway, please go ahead and say hi in the YouTube live chat. We love to see where our Seymour Center supporters are tuning in from. So say hi, say where in the world you're watching from. And we love to see it. So we'll get started in just about a minute or so as we wait for folks to join us. So welcome, everyone. All right, welcome, welcome. It's so great to see these numbers rising up, but it is 11 a.m. over here in Santa Cruz, California, but we'll get started in just about another 30 seconds to allow folks to join us. So welcome, welcome. All right, and if you're just joining us, I encourage all of our Seymour Center supporters to say hi in the live chat. Say where you're watching from this morning or afternoon or night, wherever you are in the world. And during today's program, we can even give you a quick shout out too. All righty, so it looks like it is time to get started, which is very exciting. So hi everyone, and welcome to a very special Earth Week and conservation themed Labside Chat with the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. My name is Jen, and I will be your host for today. If this is your first time tuning in for a Labside Chat, you are in for a treat. You tuned in for a great Labside Chat today. But we are going to have a Q&A style discussion, back and forth chat with a scientist from UC Santa Cruz to really see how scientific research plays a role in the understanding and conservation of the world's oceans. And like I said earlier, you're in for a treat because we have the pleasure of talking with and asking questions to Dr. Zeka Glucs. Dr. Zeka Glucs is the director of the Predatory Bird Research Program at UC Santa Cruz, and I know that we have a lot of really interesting topics to dive into during today's conversation. So Zeka, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Awesome. So Zeka, lots of folks submitted questions in advance for you that we will definitely be getting to during today's conversation. And it's going to be like a rapid fire round. I have tons of questions lined up. I'm really excited to ask them. But before we dive into those questions, I do have a quick announcement for everyone that's watching at home. I want to let everyone watching at home know that if you didn't get a question or didn't submit a question to Zeka in advance, not to worry at all. You are more than welcome to type in your question or submit your question in the YouTube live chat feature, and we'll be able to answer those questions there as well. All right, so I really don't think there's any more time to waste. Like I said, we have tons of questions and I think we need all the time we can get. So Zeka, are you ready?
Let's do this.
Great. So Zeka, I said that you are the director of the Predatory Bird Research Group at UC Santa Cruz. Can you tell us a little bit more about this group and what it is that you all do here?
Yeah, so the Predatory Bird Research Group was originally founded in 1975 to be sort of the Western arm of the peregrine falcon recovery program, which was a huge historic effort to recover the endangered species at the time, peregrine falcons. And since then, we've gone on to conduct research not only with peregrine falcons, but with several other predatory bird species. So predatory birds are any bird that eats another animal. So that could be anything from an insect, up to a large, a whale. But our group was really developed to focus on raptors, which are birds that hunt prey generally with their talons. So we're thinking hawks, osprey, eagles, owls, these kinds of species, falcons, of course. So to this day, we are working to understand more about our populations of raptors here in California, and also work to conserve them and increase awareness of these birds and their importance to our ecosystems.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that you defined what a predatory bird is, what a raptor is, and that your group was founded really to be to help the peregrine falcon population come back from potential extinction. And I know we have lots of questions about that, so we'll get to that in the conversation as well. But as the Predatory Bird Research Group, can you tell us a little bit more about the types of questions that you're trying to answer within your group? So what I like to say is if you met someone, right, at a non-scientific dinner party, if we remember what those are like, how would you explain your research and the group's initiative to someone?
Yeah, so I feel very lucky that we get to work with species that folks can see with their eyes and already have some experience with. So generally, it's really fun to talk to folks about my work at a dinner party when we get back to having those. But yeah, so generally, I'll say that we work to first and foremost monitor the health of the peregrine falcon breeding population, the recovered population in the San Francisco Bay Area. But really up from the North Bay down to Moss Landing and east to the River Delta, Sacramento River Delta. So just this larger region we've been focusing in on for our main research. But my background is in environmental toxicology, which really overlays well with predatory bird research, because as predators, they sit often on top of food chains, and a lot of contaminants work their way up those food chains to the predators at the top. And so environmental contaminants have been an issue for several raptor species, not just the peregrine falcon that was almost made extinct by a pesticide called DDT. There's several other instances of environmental contaminants affecting raptor populations. So that's one of the things that we're monitoring for, along with any changes in demographics, so reproductive rates, ages of birds, mortality factors we're picking up that might indicate some emergent threats to peregrine falcons and other predatory birds in the region.
Yeah, and so peregrine falcons, I know they're coming up a lot in the conversation. So can you tell us a little bit more about their background and how they were endangered, or what was the threat, and what the status of their population is now?
Yeah, so peregrine falcons are one of those species that are found around the world. There's several subspecies, but they're actually a consistent species in Japan and in Europe, here in North America, and they have these amazing north-south migrations, which mean they also use land masses south of the equator. So these birds are really far-ranging, but they experienced a global decline after the introduction of a miracle pesticide called DDT, which seemed to be, safe enough for vertebrates at the concentrations they were being sprayed on the fields. But unfortunately, because it's so persistent, it lasts, or at least their metabolites last a very long time in the environment, and they're stored in the tissues of organisms, in the muscle and fat. So what happens is, as predators, or as that contaminant moves its way up the food chain, the concentrations of this contaminant got really high in our predators, specifically started to show issues with reproductive success in our predatory birds, and probably to the greatest extent in the peregrine falcon. And what started to happen is that this compound ended up interfering with the eggshell formation inside of female peregrine falcons, to the point that eggs would crack under the pressure of the birds during incubation, and we were getting no new baby peregrines into the population, especially here in our lower 48. This was most pronounced east of the Rockies, where there was, and east of the Mississippi, where there was a complete extinction of peregrine falcons. Here in California, the population shrunk down to 2 breeding pairs that weren't doing too well, because they still weren't producing young successfully by the 1970s. So since then, since then and since the banning of this compound PDT for a lot of the agricultural uses that were widespread, the birds have started to recover, and today are present in potentially super historic levels because they've started to use structures that they weren't using before their bottleneck. So it's been really interesting to watch the birds current day and see how they're utilizing these urban areas around us.
Yeah, because I remember, I think one of the very first times I saw a peregrine falcon, it was a few years ago, and I was down in Monterey, and it was perched up on the Monterey Bay Aquarium's like stacks. Oh, there's like oil stacks on top of the building, and I was like, this seems really unusual to me because I always thought peregrine falcons were these like wild species, but here I saw it in an urban environment. So what's going on, and how do you think these birds are adapting to this new environment that really humans have created?
Yes, so peregrine falcons certainly are a symbol of wilderness and do incredibly well still in their historic ranges out on, cliffs and mountaintops. But they have been really good at utilizing these artificial cliffs that we've erected all over the Bay Area, such as tall buildings, smokestacks, like you mentioned. Bridges have become really popular because peregrines love to be near water. That's where a lot of their prey species are. So they eat a lot of waterfowl, shorebirds. So they love there's abundant prey in cities. Often rock pigeons can form a really important part of their diet in cities, and there aren't that many other predators to compete with. So they sort of seems, as another researcher, peregrine researcher says, sort of pre-adapted to the city landscape, these artificial cliffs and canyons with so much avian prey. And they seem to be doing really well. We've had pairs that have bred and produce, a decade of successful nests. So it doesn't appear to be, a sink for them. They can be successful in these urban environments just as they are in the wild environments. The threats are different, but they can still be successful.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that your group monitors, right, the species. And so can you define what that means by monitoring the species and what exactly that entails?
Absolutely. So we have a network of watchers out there who might have been birders already, but then they got involved in our program, or they started to notice a peregrine falcon in their neighborhood and reached out to us and have been monitoring those birds ever since. Mm-hmm. So we utilize this network of citizen scientists to basically track breeding territories, whether they're in use, whether they're successful or not. And then we go a step further here at the research group when there's enough information and the nests are accessible to go up into the nest once during the breeding season to place markers on the young called leg bands. And these leg bands identify them over their lifetime, stay on the birds their whole life. And one of them is actually provides an alphanumeric code that's big enough potentially to see if you take a digital photo or look through binoculars or a scope. And so we get a lot of information back on these individuals that were born here in the Bay Area, where they end up, how long they live, what led to their demise, should they be found dead, and potentially they get recruited back to this breeding population. So more and more we get to see birds that we banded here in the Bay Area become breeding adults here in the Bay Area, so we can track their offspring, understand how long they're on a nest site before they get superseded by another pair. So we can sort of not only track the breeding success overall of the population, but how individuals are doing and what their behaviors are over their lifetime.
Yeah, so it sounds like through this monitoring program that you have, you can learn so much information about these birds. And I'm now thinking, like, I don't even know how long a peregrine falcon lives for. What does it eat? Like, where does it live? I'm guessing cliffs because we were talking about cliffs a lot, but can you just run through some of that natural history about like the things that it eats? What does it look like? How long does it live? Those common types of questions.
Yeah, so I have a representative illustration behind my shoulders here, but peregrine falcons are the largest falcons we generally see in this area. They tend to have facial markings that look kind of like mustache or mutton chops sort of on the side of their cheek, which can differentiate them from other birds of prey. Another differentiating feature is they have very long pointy wings, and they tend to use them to fly very fast. So if you see a bird just powering by, chances are using their wings a lot, flapping hard, that's falcon flight behavior. And the reason that they do that and why they're so good at flying so quickly is because they are adapted to pursue their prey on the wing. So they will catch birds in flight to get their food. And so they've adapted to be very maneuverable and quick. And in fact, when they're in a stoop, when they're diving through the air to hit a flying prey item, they reach speeds faster than any animal on the planet. So they are really one of our superlative species here on Earth. They like to be on cliffs because they don't make nests. These are not nest making species. They just make what's called a scrape, which is just usually a little depression in the sand or gravel that they find on a cliff. They want to be high up away from other predators. They want their young to be safe. But they don't really have the ability to make a nest in a tree, for instance, unless there's a nest that they can commandeer, which happens from time to time. But this is one of the interesting issues with nesting in urban areas versus a cliff. There isn't always a nice little sandy or gravelly spot on a cement building or on a metal bridge. So what has been done sometimes by these property owners is they'll place a little box with some gravel or sand up there, which really helps the peregrine falcon to breed as they would in the wild and helps sort of cushion those eggs, helps keep them dry, and able to stay warm through incubation. So that's how they kind of can transfer all of these skills to the cities, artificial landscapes.
Right. Wow. These birds are so intense and so cool. And so if anyone tries to tell me that a cheetah is the fastest animal anymore, no, no, no. I have this new information in my back pocket and I'm so excited to pull it out. That's awesome. So it's really inspiring because these peregrine falcons, right, they're a conservation success story, it sounds like, right? We were just down to these 2 breeding pairs and now there's a whole population that thriving, is that the right word? Maybe. Okay. So can you tell us about some of those successful management tools to help save these predatory birds from potential extinction?
Yeah. So really with peregrine falcons, I think action was taken really at the exact time that it needed to, which is a great example for future recovery programs, and really has served as an example for a lot of recovery programs. So some of the tools that they pioneered with the peregrine falcon, or that our group helped pioneer, was captive breeding and release, as well as different kinds of nest manipulation to try to improve breeding success and boost populations that way. This involved, luckily, peregrine falcons can do something very cool called multiple clutching. So if you remove eggs early enough after laying, they'll go ahead and lay a whole nother clutch of eggs. So through captive breeding and multiple clutching, they're able to actually produce a lot of chicks very quickly, artificially incubate them, and then release them into the wild with some support as far as like available food until they're ready to hunt on their own. And this actually worked great. But really what I believe was the main hurdle for these birds and what was overcome was the DDT in the environment. Mm-hmm. And this was just an amazing situation where there was political will to do something about this, to control the substance DDT. The Endangered Species Act had just been created, and so there was also funds to do all of this other kinds of captive breeding and management work in the wild, and protect habitat for these birds. And this sort of well, anyway, these two things overlapped at the same time at the right time. There's a lot of public support, and with making these quick decisions, these birds were able to fully, reestablish themselves quickly. And unfortunately, sometimes now there's a lot more pushback to these kinds of programs and ideas, and removing of substances from the production line. But really, it goes to show that if the will is there, if the money's there, if folks want to save species, it's very possible. These animals are incredibly resilient, and they just need to be given a chance to recover.
Yeah, I love that. These animals are resilient. They just need a chance. And, hopefully we can do that. And, in the spirit of Earth Day of today, right, we can give these animals a chance. So great. So Zeka, somehow we are running up to time. So I only have a few more questions left for you. But I wanted to ask you more about the monitoring process that your group participates in. And I wanted to ask you, what does a typical field day look like for you when you are working with these predatory birds? If you could just briefly explain to us the steps that your group has to take in order to, make sure that all this data is collected.
Yes. So I usually don't get to go into the field as much as our volunteers do. My big moment is banding day for the young, for the nest entries and collecting samples. So I do want to say that before I even arrive on the scene, there has been hours and hours of observation that's occurred at this site, at distances to the nest that are safe enough, that aren't going to affect bird behavior. Our volunteers will go out and spend an hour to sometimes 4 hours trying to establish in any given day what's going on in that nest. And so, because often you can't see into that nest. We do have some nest cams, and we can talk about that later, that give us really great information on the nest. But otherwise, we rely on folks that are able to interpret the adult behaviors to understand what's happening inside the nest. So they'll be out there looking for where food's going, where the adults are hanging out, what they're doing can let us know when the young have hatched. And then 3 weeks after that, that's when I show up, depending on the site. If it's a cliff or a building, it could be just an elevator ride up to a peregrine falcon nest, or I could be using some ropes to rappel down into the nest. Of course, the elevator rides are great. Those could be nice and quick. But yeah, then we'll generally find 3 to 4 peregrine falcon chicks that are just starting to grow in their flight feathers, but are mostly fluffy, white, cute little birds. And we have some of those on our nest cams right now. I highly recommend going and looking at them at this stage. They're incredibly cute. But they're at a stage where their legs are large enough that they can hold these leg bands for the rest of their life, that they're going to fit them appropriately. But they're undeveloped enough that they can't really move around that quickly in the nest yet. So it's safe to go in. They're not going to fledge early from the nest, which would be, cause injuries to them. We don't want that to happen. So I'll go up there, we'll measure them, determine their sex. Peregrine falcons are really interesting, and like a lot of raptors, they have reverse sexual dimorphism, meaning the females are larger than the males, but they're super divergent in size in peregrine falcons, and the females are 30% larger than the males. So it's very clear once you measure their legs, which they are. So we can sex them, we place bands on the birds, and then we've begun to also collect feather samples to understand the genetics of the population, as well as start to look at some contaminants, specifically mercury, which is a marine contaminant. So after we do that, hopefully it's only been about 20 minutes or so in the nest. We leave the nest and let those birds go ahead and mature to fledging. The adults don't like us being there, so they are diving and screaming the whole time. So that's why we try to do it very quickly, so they're not using up too much energy. And then they are satisfied that they've scared us away, and they go right back to parenting the young. But but yeah, so then I write all that information in my notebook and I take it back to the office, and we continue to track the birds in our databases here at UC Santa Cruz.
Yeah, so who knew that your field day would include potentially scaling cliffs on some rock climbing equipment, making sure that these adult peregrine falcons, which I assume have pretty sharp talons and beaks, are coming at you, all in the name of science. So I can only imagine that you are a very, very trained professional, and only professionals should be doing this and getting close to these types of birds. So wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and peregrine falcons are still highly protected. I should mention that too. So you actually have to have extra permits to work with them, and extra reasons to to bother them. So certainly you want to stay away from peregrine falcon nests during the breeding season, at your own peril, as well as to help protect these birds.
Definitely. Okay, so I have one more question for you, and it's a question I think that might be on everybody's mind, is that the Seymour Center is dedicated to showing how scientific research plays a role in ocean conservation, right, and understanding. And some folks may be asking, like, why are we talking about predatory birds? What's going on here? And I know in some of your answers you alluded to the marine environment, but if you could just briefly walk us through why understanding predatory birds relates to or correlates with ocean conservation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So not just peregrine falcons, but many raptors that reside here on the California coast, they sit at the top of two different food chains, really. They've got the terrestrial food chain that's providing them with the land-bound prey items, but also that marine food chain. And like I mentioned before, contaminants move up the food chain generally and can be found in highest concentrations in predators often, depending on their chemical makeup. But a lot of the marine contaminants we're worried about do have that behavior in food chains. Peregrine falcons are one of many birds that were impacted by DDT, for instance, and other similar contaminants. And a lot of them were marine birds in the marine food chain. So think brown pelicans, osprey, bald eagles. And that's because the marine food chain generally has a lot more links than the terrestrial food chain. And that's because you've got, plankton, vertebrates, and then you've got fish that eat fish that eat fish that go up through then into seabirds or shorebirds in this case, and into peregrine falcons. And so peregrine falcons, and also a species that I worked with in the past, California condors, who consume marine mammals, which can really accumulate these toxins, can actually be great sentinels for what's going on in our marine food chains, and also can be very impacted by the health of the oceans. It goes both ways. So what we're trying to look at is whether or not being close to the coast is, well, we know that it's helping these birds because it provides a lot of food, but is it also potentially a source of contamination in their diet? And through peregrine falcons, we've certainly been able to monitor the reductions in DDT over time. And we could do the same for other contaminants that you find in the marine ecosystems. So there's a lot of interplay between terrestrial and marine environments in general on the coast. But peregrine falcons really are an apex marine predator.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for explaining that. I think, I had no idea. It makes sense, though, that these peregrine falcons, or these predatory birds, are at the top of the food chain, and they eat a lot of, other animals that are found in the marine environment. So that's fascinating. And Zeka, I can't believe it, but somehow time has flown by. And so unfortunately, I am not able to ask you the thousands of other questions that I have lined up. But I'm hoping that you have a website or social media or someplace online where folks can go to learn more about you and your research and maybe find the answers to some of those questions. So do you have anything like that people can go to?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we do have a website up on the UCSC website. Hopefully we can get that posted up here. for you guys to check out. It has a lot of information on what we do, but also ways to contact us directly. And then, of course, we are active on social media, so please do check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you use any of those platforms, we update on how our nests are doing, different student projects, and just fun happenings to do with predatory birds in our region.
Awesome. So I put all of those links in the YouTube live chat so folks can go check them out. They'll also be in the video description below after we wrap up our conversation here. And I have to say, on your website, there are links to live nest cams. And I personally have to say how incredible those are. I remember one time I was watching a nest cam, I think it was last year, and I saw a peregrine falcon bring in a pigeon to the nest to feed to its young. And it was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. Not good for the squeamish, but it was absolutely amazing. So I just have to say how amazing those nest cams are. And I highly recommend checking them out when folks have the chance to do so. But Zeka, thank you so much for sharing those links with us. And I just can't thank you enough for being here today, sharing your expertise. It's very, very clear that you have the coolest job in the world. But I just can't thank you enough for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the other questions, but yeah, please do reach out if folks are interested in these birds specifically, other birds in the region, if you ever see a peregrine falcon, or if you want to get involved as a volunteer. So look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zeka. And before we officially sign off, I want to also say a big thank you to everyone tuning in at home. It's really Seymour Center supporters like you that make these online programs possible. So thank you so much for tuning in today and for your ongoing support. If you're in the position and if you feel so inclined, I ask that you please either make a donation or become a member with the Seymour Center so we can keep these online programs available and running. So thank you again so much. This Labside Chat is in celebration of Earth Week and Earth Day. So a big celebration of our Earth and our ocean today. The Seymour Center has lots of other activities that you can take advantage of. So I will actually drop that link in the YouTube live chat right now so folks can enjoy more Earth Week or Earth Day activities, but a very, very happy Earth Day to all of you. Thank you again for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we will see you at our next virtual event. Bye, everyone. Thank you.